I've had this for a bit now, and a few people ask me about it. So here is my take after using it for home backup, a couple camping weekends, and some time with a recreational vehicle setup. At a basic level, this is a big battery in a box with a built-in inverter and a bunch of ports, meant to run everyday devices when you are not on the grid or when the power drops at home. I see it making the most sense for people who want something they can keep around for outages, or people who camp and actually want to power real appliances instead of just charging phones. It also makes sense if you have a recreational vehicle and you want a quieter option for short stretches where you do not want to run a gas generator. What makes this one stand out in real use is charging speed and how it handles heavier loads. I have tested a few power stations over the years, and a lot of them are fine once they are full, but they are slow to refill, so you end up planning your whole day around charging. With this one, I stopped thinking about charging as much, because when I plug it into the wall, it can take a lot of power and refill fast enough to fit into normal life. On the outside, it is a dark gray box with a flat top. The flat top sounds like a small thing, but I keep finding myself setting a phone or a headlamp up there while I plug things in, and it is nice having a stable surface. The body feels solid. There are rubber feet that help it stay put, and the port covers are the kind of thing I did not care about until I used it outside. They help keep dust out, and they also stop you from bumping a connector by accident. The controls are simple physical buttons. There is a main power button and separate buttons for alternating current and direct current. I prefer that for something like this. When I am tired or it is dark or I am in the middle of an outage, I do not want to fight a screen. The display is bright and readable, and it tells me what I actually need in the moment, like how much power is going in, how much is going out, the battery percent, and an estimate for time remaining. Those time estimates jump around a bit depending on load, but they are still useful. The part you notice immediately is the weight. It is around 60 pounds. I can lift it and carry it, but I do not enjoy carrying it very far, and I definitely think about stairs. I treat it as transportable, not something I casually grab with one hand on the way out the door. In my use, it lives on a shelf in the garage for backup, and when I take it camping or to the recreational vehicle, I plan the move and I clear a path. If you need something you can carry long distances, this is not that kind of unit. One thing I want to be clear about, there is not an official weather rating. I do not leave it sitting out in the rain or in heavy dust. When I used it camping, I kept it under the awning or inside the tent area where it stayed dry. For home backup, it is obviously not an issue, but if your plan is leaving a power station outside full time, this is not the one I would pick. Setup is straightforward. The alternating current charging cable plugs right into the unit, which I appreciate, because there is no big power brick to deal with. I also want to mention the included cables are keyed and they fit well, but they are not the kind of cable you are going to replace at a random convenience store. I keep them together in a small bag, because losing one would be annoying at the wrong time. In day-to-day use, the port selection covers most of what I do. I have charged laptops through the 100-watt United States Bureau of Shipping Type-C ports. I have used the United States Bureau of Shipping Type-A ports for older devices. The 12-volt car-style outlet has been useful for a small cooler. The recreational vehicle outlet is a big deal if you actually have a recreational vehicle, because it lets you connect in a standard way without me having to stack adapters and hope nothing is loose. Now let me talk about real use and what I actually ran on it. At home, I tested it the way I would use it during an outage. I ran a full-size refrigerator, my modem and router, a couple lights, and I charged 2 laptops. It stayed stable the whole time. I did not get flickers. I did not get random shutoffs. That is the baseline expectation, but not every unit behaves well once you start adding multiple loads and cycling things on and off. I also tested it in uninterruptible power supply mode. The switchover is fast enough that my desktop computer and my network gear did not reboot when I cut wall power. I did that test multiple times because that is the kind of thing that can be inconsistent. For my setup, it worked the way I wanted. I still would not use this as the only protection for sensitive work without testing it yourself, but as a practical backup for home internet and a computer, it did the job. For heavier loads, I used a microwave, an electric kettle, and a couple power tools. The inverter has enough headroom that those loads did not feel risky. The microwave test is important because microwaves can be picky about power quality. It ran normally. The kettle pulled a lot of wattage like you would expect, and it drained the battery quickly like any battery would, but it did not trip the inverter. With power tools, the startup surge is usually what causes issues. I ran a circular saw for short cuts, and it handled the starts without acting unstable. There is also a power lifting mode meant for resistive loads. In real life, that means things like a space heater. I tried it with a basic space heater that would normally push smaller inverters too hard. It ran, but I want to say out loud what this means in practice. You can do it, but you are trading battery time for heat, and it will drain fast. I see it as something for short bursts, not as a replacement for a real heating plan. Charging is the part that changed how I used it. On wall power, I was able to go from empty to around 80% in roughly 45 minutes. To fully charge took about an hour and a half in my testing. That is fast enough that if I forget to top it off and I realize I need it, I can plug it in while I pack the car or while I eat lunch, and I'm not stuck waiting all day. Solar charging has also been reliable. The solar input range is flexible enough that I could use a mixed set of panels I already had. On a clear day with enough panel wattage connected, I saw it climb toward its solar limit, and that makes a same-day recharge realistic if you have the panel capacity and decent sun. I also noticed it does a decent job of holding steady when clouds roll through, which tells me the solar charge controller is behaving the way it should. Noise is another practical point. The fans do come on, especially during fast charging or heavier output, but in my use it stayed at a low hum. I would not want it right next to my head while sleeping in a small van, but a few feet away it did not bother me. In a house during an outage, it is quieter than a lot of other things you might run. There are a few limitations that showed up during real use. One is efficiency at very low alternating current loads. If you run a tiny alternating current device for hours, like a 50-watt load, you might notice the battery dropping faster than you expect. That is not because the unit is broken. It is because running the inverter has overhead. When I switched those small loads over to direct current ports, like powering networking gear through direct current, the runtime improved. So I treat the alternating current outlets as something I use when I need alternating current, and I use direct current when I can. Another limitation is the weight, which I already mentioned, but it matters enough to say twice. If you want something you can move constantly, this will get old. I can carry it from the car to a campsite table. I do not want to carry it down a long trail. I also wish it had a built-in light for outages. I kept reaching for a flashlight when I was plugging things in at night, and I would have used a wireless charging pad on top more than I expected. Neither is a deal breaker, but those are small quality of life things that come up when you actually live with it. The smart features are useful, with a few quirks. The mobile app connects over Bluetooth and over wireless internet. I like wireless internet because I can check status from another room, or even when I am away, as long as it is on my home network. It gives me a clear view of input and output and battery state, and I can toggle alternating current and direct current from the app. One thing to know is the alternating current outlets behave like a group, not individual switches per outlet. That is fine most of the time. I just want you to know that if your plan is turning one thing off while leaving another thing on, you will need to physically unplug or manage it another way. I also ran into a minor software behavior issue with time of use charging. It did not always do what I expected when grid power was available. My workaround was using a customized uninterruptible power supply setting and keeping a tight battery window so it preferred wall power the way I wanted. It worked, but it is not as smooth as it could be. For me, the hardware has been dependable, and the software feels like something that can improve with updates. So where do I land after using it? I think the BLUETTI AC200L makes sense if you want a power station that can run real household and recreational vehicle loads and refill quickly. It is not something I would recommend for someone who wants lightweight portability or someone who plans to leave it exposed outside. I also think it works best if you are willing to use direct current outputs for small loads when possible, because that helps with runtime. What I like is that it has enough output to run the appliances people actually ask about. It charges fast enough to be practical. It stays reasonably quiet. And the uninterruptible power supply mode worked in my testing without causing my computer to restart. What I do not like is carrying it, the lack of weather sealing, and a couple small app limitations that you may or may not care about depending on how you use it. If you have questions about a specific device you want to run, or you want to know what my actual runtimes looked like for a certain setup, leave a comment and I will try to help based on what I tested. If this video was useful, subscribe to the channel and leave your thoughts or your own experience in the comments. Thank you for watching.